And what did you do after you graduated from college?
That the very you see, as I said, we come from a large family. My father's youngest brother, and I was very close to him. And I come from a large family, my uncles and stuff like that. And this uncle of mine was based in Bombay and a very successful businessman. He used to run a company called Rally Wolf, and he was living on top of the factory. His house is on top of the factory and way out in a place called Mulund, which is pretty far off even then. Yes. So he said that, why don't you come to Bombay and try working in Bombay, and I'll put you onto a firm called Architects Combine, who've been our company's architects for many years. They're a very respected firm. And I'm sure that will be a good place for you to learn. So off I went to Bombay and joined Architects Combine on a salary of 275 rupees a month. Right? And I'm talking about 1978. Right? So the advantage was I was staying with my uncle, so I didn't have to worry so much about rent and stuff like that, leave alone rent, what about food and things like that. But anyway, Architects Combine was a great firm to work with. There were 5 classmates, very reputed architects. Kamu Iyer was one, Raja Puredi was other. There was one, Mr. Mandrekar, then there was Dilip Rohit. They were all, incidentally, classmates who started, as soon as they graduated in 1956, they started this company. And the name Architects Combine is 5 friends combining together to run a practice. Right? Each partner had his own practice, but yet they were just contributing to the running of the firm. So whatever they earned, they took it other than giving a share. So it was a learning experience. They were never made you feel as if you were a fresher. They gave you importance. They made you feel important for the fact that you'd spent a good 5 years studying architecture. Also, the fact that having worked with Bharat helped me a lot, because I'd already worked in an office and knew how an office works. Then what happened was, within about 3 months, they had a branch in Bangalore and they said, would you like to go and work in Bangalore? So I said, why not? Because it's one closer to home. And also the fact that was a much smaller office. There were only about 3 or 4 people. So I thought the learning process would be better if I went to a smaller setup.
Yeah, you'd get more responsibility.
So I moved immediately to Bangalore. But the tricky part was, my salary was increased by 50 rupees to 325. And I had to live in 325, hire a room, take a room on rent and then manage your food and stuff like that. So there was a learning days, that learning curve, the way to conserve money, all that, came quite naturally. It was tough, but we managed it. So, but there's a very funny story there, because I was sharing a room with 2 others. Again, my rowing friends, people from the sport of rowing, who had incidentally got jobs in Bangalore. One was a BA, the other was a BCom. The guy who had done a BA was earning 2,000 rupees. The guy who had done BCom was earning 1,050 rupees. And here I was, and their courses were just 3 years, mind you. Mine was a good 5 years. And I was earning 325 rupees. So that day, or around about that time, I said to myself that whenever I start practice, an architect will be treated with respect. He will be paid well, so that he never gets the feeling that he is underpaid compared to other professions. So these are things that you learn through the hard way, because you learned them through experiences. It's not as if it's, you're a whiz kid and all this happened to you. You learn something because of what you've gone through in life. And these are very important experiences. While I was working with Architects Combine in Bangalore, I'm not very sure, but I think it was a friend or a cousin or somebody who spotted this advertisement that came in the newspaper, in the Indian Express, asking for architects to work for a company in Colombo called Edward Reed and Big. Right. That was sent to me and I immediately applied. I still didn't have a clue as to who Geoffrey Bawa was.
Wow.
I didn't have a clue what Edward Redenbach was.
Okay.
Right? Because don't forget, I was just about 9 months into being a full-fledged architect. And then I started doing there was no internet there, so how do you try and find out what an Edward Redenbach is? And the interview letter that came was a postcard, a handwritten postcard that said, come for an interview in such and such a place in Chennai, in Madras, on such and such a time. It's only when I went for the interview, that did I realize, when I saw this 6'7", absolutely hefty, a British-looking gentleman who introduced himself as Geoffrey Bawa.
Geoffrey Bawa did your interview?
Absolutely.
My God.
Geoffrey Bawa did the interview, and maybe because the way I spoke, because of my background and things like that, I got a job. So, then when I started speaking to people, they all say, oh, you got a job with Geoffrey Bawa. You don't know how lucky you are. I said, yes, it is. But it was only after I started working in Colombo, when I actually started seeing the office and seeing the kind of houses that they'd done, I realized how lucky I was to get that kind of a job. The exposure changed 180 degrees all the way through. There was no coming back. It's that exposure to working under that gentleman, who's one of the most brilliant architects I've ever come across, and seeing his work. I was very fortunate that, me and another friend of mine, a senior of mine in Chennai called Jeevan, we were both selected to work for Geoffrey Bawa, and at that time he was designing the Parliament of Sri Lanka.
Okay.
It was a design-build assignment, and the contractors were Mitsui of Japan. So you had the advantage of learning from Bawa, getting the Japanese technology of precision by working with Mitsui, because their architects were also part of this team. So the way you presented your drawings, the way you standardized things, all those advantages came from working with the Japanese. So I think these are all experiences that you never look back on, and you're damn grateful that you got them. Right? So my stint with Bawa lasted about 3 years. Thoroughly enjoyable time in terms of not only living all by myself, but I'm saying with a couple of friends, but also the fact that it was not very strenuous work. You went into work at about 8:30, took a break at 12:30, came back to work at 2:30, worked till 4:30, and that was it.
That sounds like a lovely day.
Great place to work for, and the time was also, of course, knowing ourselves, we did push ourselves that little longer. So that was a great experience working for him. Managed to work on a couple of beach resorts while I was there. But more than anything is the exposure of looking at what he's designed and getting it dinned into your head that this is the way things have to be done. That is the learning curve.
So what exactly from his work really spoke to you?
Landscape. Landscape came to him so naturally. Right? And his architecture was completely, how do I put it to you? It was not the modern stuff that you keep talking about. It was everything that blended with nature. It had everything of reuse of materials. You talk today of conservation and all that. He was very simple. He found an old column somewhere, he'll immediately use that old column in a building. He'd start hunting around for things like these. So I'm saying his style of vernacular architecture was stunning. That's where I learned, I'm known to do a lot of tiled roofs and sloped roofs, and even today, people specifically come to me as Venkat as an architect, not as the boss of NVA, saying that if I go to Venkat, this is the kind of style I'll get. That is all what I learned from Bawa. Right? The style of architecture is very, very reminiscent of Bawa's. So that was the biggest takeaway from having worked there.
I noticed that as well at your farmhouse.
Yes.
The use of the landscape and materials that you had used, that was something that, that was so evident as I was shooting.
That is also, let me interrupt you, that is also because having learned that, landscape is something that's very natural.
Yes, yeah.
It can't be sort of done prim and proper and, perfectly clean and things like that. It has to be as natural as it comes. And that's something that's always sort of been in the back of my mind when you relate a building, especially when I do so many courtyards. Keep it as natural as I can. It cannot be a manicured kind of a place.
Yes, absolutely.
It has to be something that's very natural.
And a bit wild.
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. It should have looked sculptured. These are all learnings, as I said. So that is my stint with Bawa.